Blogtalk Radio.
Well, good morning. This is Blogtalk Radio, informal conversation with Noel Longhurst of East Anglia University, Grassroots Initiative on Complementary Currencies, hopefully joined by Les Moore and Ernie at some point. I'm now going to bring Noel into the conversation, I hope, to conference. Noel.
Hi.
Hi. Good day to you, sir.
Good day to you.
Yeah. And we are live, and as far as I can tell, we're recording.
Okay.
I never know for sure until we get to the end of the show, but let's assume that we are at this point. I've announced it as an informal discussion between Noel Longhurst, University of East Anglia, Grassroots Initiative on Complementary Currencies, possibly to be joined by Les, possibly to be joined by Ernie, but what the hell? We're all here and we're happy. So I just sent Google Doc to you, by the way, which...
Yeah.
Good. Okay. It's just some outline of the topic areas that I felt were perhaps useful to cover so that we don't get too sort of sideswiped by the process or confused or forget what we're talking about. Sorry it came to you so late, but they're really just notes, and I think we can roll as we do. Okay, anything? I identify this as a conversation to explore some of the issues between the conventional transition towns complementary models, cash-backed, and the potential transition from such models, which are becoming legion, they're popping up all over the place, transition to more substantial and differently operated community currencies, in this case preferably underwritten by businesses to provide the convertibility factor or the redemption factor, at least in terms of the strength of the currency. So it's a standard how do you get from here to there sort of concept. Given that the complementary currencies are popping up everywhere, and that I think, and I have said on many occasions and will continue to do so, that they functionally achieve nothing of any significance beyond presentation, promotion, opening the conversation, getting people going. But in my view, the effect of a complementary currency with cash backing is fundamentally insignificant in that it doesn't actually change anything. I don't think there are differences in the basic transaction base that occurs, the choices that people make, the inflow or outflow of funds to the community, or the persistence of a currency pattern inside the community, which is, of course, from my perspective, the most important factor. Maybe you want to have a few comments on that, Noel, my basically analysis that they don't do much.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't tend to disagree too much, I think, from my perspective. But what the qualifier I would add, and I think this kind of follows on from our previous discussion, was at this point, I guess, and as we've kind of discussed and kind of emailed about the stuff that Josh is trying to do with Ness and the technical limitations to the cash-backed system and the models that may be emerging that try and transcend that and also link into other kind of what you might call kind of hybrid systems. I'm kind of vaguely aware of some ideas of kind of linking a kind of consumer-facing cash-backed system to a kind of C3 type model, which I don't know a lot about at the moment, but I know there's someone in Bristol in the UK who's trying to look at how that might work. So I agree with what with your analysis, but I would kind of proviso that that's kind of current landscape, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that the model is completely redundant or inherently flawed per se at the moment.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that it's an open process and there's much happening. I mean, that is, for a large extent, the initiative of your initiative is to explore the validity and the effectiveness and the factors affecting these various diverse initiatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so really what I'm looking at this point is the specifics of something like a Totnes or a Lewis or Brixton or Berkshire, or in this part of the world, a Salt Spring dollar, a Chemainus dollar.
Yeah.
The bog standard, we print the paper, people buy it from outlets, it moves at par value through the retail chain, and then it's available to the various holders, sometimes all of them, but sometimes just the businesses, to redeem the money at possibly at par, sometimes at 95 or 90% of value.
Yeah.
So taking that as a sort of the baseline model, and just annotating my point that I think they do nothing but move around like I describe it as ice cubes in a leaking bucket.
Yeah.
You know, like it doesn't change the necessary inflow or outflow, and it doesn't really make any difference apart from rattling around and making a bit of visuals.
Yeah.
But, and the big thing is that by adopting that 100% acceptability model, boy, we are back, so you can't fail by taking it, you get very high levels of penetration in the local business community.
Yeah.
In fact, a business would be an idiot not to take the money. It makes them look like anti-community, etc. So the greatest advantage of the conventional complementary cashback is its acceptability.
Yeah.
Right? And that's terrific, because that's the biggest impediment that we have in any community currency model, is getting through the marginality, getting through the limited application, the fringe effect. Those people are weird. We don't want to be associated with them. And so I'm looking at this as potentially a way of taking the advantages of the complementary initiative and transiting it to a rather more powerful model that could go somewhere else. Because the biggest problem with the complementaries in terms of what they're doing is that they're undertaking to buy every dollar that's out there, every pound, every local, because that's the contract. And that's great in terms of ensuring the contract. Of course, it means that the actual amount of community money in circulation is dependent upon how much has been bought, and that therefore the mainspring of the energy of the system is just general ongoing consumer interest, which can come and can go, and it's a problem that sometimes emerges. I mean, Bernard Lietaer has a model for supporting small businesses waiting for payments from big businesses. Can't quite recall what he calls it. It's not the C3, but it's something similar, I think, where the amount of money that is available to these these small businesses is determined by the extent to which they have accounts receivable on the bigger boys. Again, it's a pump up and bleed down. It's a bit like bagpipes, you know. When you got air in the bag, you can blow. But if you pumped it all out, you're gone. And the trouble with these models that are based upon backing is that the backing is the dominant factor. So I'd love to see something shifted that got it going in other directions, particularly for expanding the conversation about these things. Because I think the conversation has been lamentably imprecise. All too much has been accepted as within the field, when really it's beyond the bounds of rationality at times. And the reason it's not working is because it's not workable.
Yeah.
Anyway, my analysis, my suggestion that we got to get past the cash reserve, and I've got one point on this as well, is that for all that the public relations around Berkshires and whatever is strong and powerful, regios, references to the were, whatever, the scaling factor doesn't seem to be significant. First of all, because it'd be bloody difficult to scale any of these things. They'd be quite expensive and could introduce a lot of problems for counterfeiting and fraud. But if they're not making any great difference, then scaling them makes even less difference. And I've always felt that the were, for instance, for all the fact that it's been persistent for 40 or 50 years in different ways, longer in fact, I think it was pre-war.
Yeah.
I don't think it does anything. I think it's a nice piece of social boys club, a bit like Rotary or a church social, and it creates reasons to trade with your neighbors, but no compulsion or drive to do so based upon the system. It's really just a convenient way of saying, aren't we all together, boys? Let's be friendly with each other, which is good, but it could be done with cash without any significant difference in the process.
Okay. I mean, I'm not a kind of expert on the VIR, but I can remember reading there's a paper knocking about somewhere which kind of suggests that it does have a kind of counter-cyclical.
Yeah, James Stoddard from Rensselaer in Connecticut has published quite extensively on this. And I think it's right. When the Swiss economy is booming, the VIR goes down a bit. When the Swiss economy is flattening, the VIR comes up a bit.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a surge tank. It's an argument that's often been used about local monies, community currencies, whatever, is, they will come when the economy goes tilt.
Yeah.
I think that's generally an indication that the people who are responding at that point haven't got the big picture. They're responding out of panic and deficit issues. They're not looking at the positive aspects of what these currencies could be doing.
Yeah.
So it's a bit lame. It's about people falling off the Titanic and they want a life belt. It's not about learning to swim. There's no creative component in that form of counter-cyclical substitution. But I do appreciate Stoddard's work. It lends a degree of academic respectability to that whole field of the analysis of VIR and the commercial barter networks, which have been doing this for 40 years and haven't had the degree of technical analysis that basically they should have, either within the industry, who tend to be a bunch of idiots in my experience, nice idiots, some of them, but completely confronted by their own model. They don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
But maybe that's somewhere the grassroots boys could put a little outside edge on your research and have some conversations with some of those guys.
Yeah.
Because they are turning over dollars. Something like 30 billion or something is turnover, I'm told, in general these days. However, there we go. We're 13 minutes into this, and so far just covered the outside and the shapes and the reasons.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that one, or side?
No, not at this point. No. No.
Good. Great. So, supposing we have a community in somewheresville, little town, God knows where, who've got their community or complementary currency, their cash-backed, buy it at the bank package. My proposition is that can be progressively and gradually retired, perhaps over a very short period, maybe a few weeks.
Yeah. And
substituted with the simultaneous release of for instance, and for the purposes of this discussion, I'd prefer to restrict to the one that I know, which is the business-backed donation to charity by community money, the Community Way model. Because they can be, in my view, seamlessly interfaced with no change in the specific medium and with no time delays. It's really a question of explanation to the business community that's currently taking it on the grounds that they can always turn it in, is there needs to be some outreach to that business group saying, we are retiring the, I'd say 20,000 quid. Suppose there's 20,000 quid in circulation already, which is
right.
Probably a number. And there's 20,000 in the reserve fund. So you put out some notice to the community, the businesses in particular, which would be difficult in some places because people will take a long time to read their mail, to see a poster, to see a note in the paper, to hear from their clients or whatever. Hey, did you know the local pound is being retired and reissued? And if you want cash for the local pound, go to the bank in the next 3 weeks or 3 days or 3 hours, because after that, the currency in circulation will not be redeemed by the organization for cash. It will instead be a business-backed money, which you can take to any of the issuing businesses, and there won't be 100% slate of those in any small community. One might expect, say, maybe 10% of the businesses in the community to be interested in that aspect of the currency. The other 90% we would expect to have various attitudes towards taking it or leaving it. At the moment they'll take it because they can take it down to the bank occasionally and turn it into hard cash. When that is no longer available to them, the businesses that have been taking this on the side, that is, no commitment to participation, no contract, no nothing, will probably be well advised to reduce it to acceptance at their gross margin, their cost of goods plus value added split. So a restaurant, for instance, was taking the local pound, should go to something like, we take it at 50% on food. A retailer in, say, men's clothing might say something like, we take 30% in the community money, the rest is cash. And all sales taxes, please, will be paid in cash on top of the total invoice. If the businesses accept that, then they can carry on regardless, because everything that they accept is surplus to the cash flow that's generated by the individual action. So even if the money turned out to be totally worthless, they haven't lost anything. That may not be an encouraging statement, but at least it's the bottom line on contingency and the bailout option. It's if the businesses do value added on their costs, only accept a proportion of an invoice or maybe a proportion of their monthly sales in community money, then they can do so in a manner which protects their cash flow.
Okay.
Now, the model I've got is that as the pieces of paper come in for redemption in cash, they should be clipped or embossed or preferably some sort of a little die cut in the corner, a little cut out a few notches of the paper so that it's got a marked, this piece has been cash cleared. Then those individual notes can be reissued through the business of the charities that are the recipients of the donations by the businesses on the account. And we recommend that the businesses who become the underwriters do so by making substantial donations, about maybe as much as 1,000 quid, community quid per employee, to a raft of local charities and community groups or whatever. Donor directed, so a small business with, say, 10 employees puts about 10,000 community pounds to the school, the local band, the football club, whatever it likes. And therefore is minus 10,000 on the books, and those collective charities are plus 10,000 on the books. At this point, no paper has gone anywhere. But when one of those charities says, I'd like 1,000 of these changed into paper so that I can distribute it to my staff or my workers, or I can put it on sale in the front room, then the community organization, the service organization for the currency, provides 1,000 of these franked out or die cut bills to the charity and debits that charity's account by 1,000. And then you have the 1,000 that were pulled from circulation, stamped, cashed out, are now out with this modified presentations, a clip out corner or something, maybe a big thumbprint on them in indelible ink, who knows what the game should be. And then they're identified as business bank money, not as cash-backed or cash redeemable money. And that should be enough to do it. The interface with the general public, for instance, of the local bank, the local grocery stores, the local community organization that's sponsoring this entire project, that issuance of the money to the general public can continue exactly as before. The counter takes cash, gives out paper, local money paper, but with the distinction that the cash that it takes is no longer deposited to a reserve fund for the redemption of that money, but the cash is instead directed without reduction or commission or fees or anything. So pound for pound, the cash coming in goes to the charities or community groups that the changer, the person who came in with the cash to take away the local, that changer says, my cash goes to the school, or my cash goes to the Save the Marmoset Society, or whatever they particularly like. But that's the only distinction, is that the interface at the bank has to be able to accept that information. Please give my money to the church. Please give my money to the school. That's the whole package.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's a couple of thoughts, and this has come up from my discussions with other people about how such a transition might work. And the first one, I think, kind of relates to kind of changing the mindset of the businesses and whether that's more of a barrier than you're kind of anticipating.
Oh, yeah, much more. It's always a barrier, and it's bigger than you expect. Dead right. This is the big one. So, carry on.
Yeah, and so this kind of, because, so from their role within the system, presuming you're talking about the same group of businesses who are participants, changes quite substantially. And I think that was seen by some of the people I spoke to as a kind of a real barrier. And particularly, I think maybe it's a more of a cultural thing, but there's not quite the same culture of kind of local philanthropy in the UK as as perhaps I understand there might be in North America. So whether or not, I think there was a concern about whether businesses would kind of even anticipate the role of, you know, the way it's put into your circulation through kind of basically the gift businesses, as far as I understand it, decide how many to kind of put into circulation, as you're saying, like you would work on $1,000 per employee or whatever. I'm not even, it's whether that scale of donation is feasible within the kind of small business community within the UK.
Well, whether it's seen as feasible, I think, is the key point. And that's where we're talking about barriers, we're talking about local cultures, we're talking about styles. I think we've got to start from the proposition that almost anything we do, it has barriers. Yeah. Everything has got the quality of novelty to somebody, or change, or why you're doing that. And certainly there will be regional differences. Certainly the prevalence of sort of service clubs in North America, you know, Rotary, the Kinsman, the Lions Club, they tend to create this localization of philanthropy, which is stronger in North America than it is in Europe. But I'm relating this more to the businesses' participation in things like commercial barter. Again, more prevalent in North America than Europe, but a local, a community barter or a commercial barter system will usually have businesses with lines of quote, credit in their network in the region of $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. That's what goes on in the business-to-business world in this side. So in asking the business to contemplate a similar degree of exposure, let's create 10,000 or whatever community pounds in this method, it doesn't stretch that in any significant way. Now, of course, in the UK, it's a stretch because these things are not quite so common.
Yeah.
But we've generally found that businesses are under pressure by the community at almost all times for help us at the school fair, help us for the sports team. We're running a marathon this week. Do you want to buy the display ads or whatever?
Yeah, no, that's fair, yeah.
And they're being regularly beat up on. Some of my local businesses in my community here say that they get once or twice a day. Somebody will come in and ask them for a donation on something.
Yeah.
And that's difficult, problematic. It's bad customer relationships to say, go away, I hate you. So it's a problem. And to give them something like a solution, which is, oh, sure, I'll give you 100 community money. Because the businesses now have a line of credit in the community money. It's not that they're just carrying it, it's that they are the underwriters for which they carry the kudos, the credit, the reputation side. Now, I know that a lot of the businesses that are attracted to a transition town model will be dismayed by this. Certainly the light carriers, the easy riders, if you like, the people who say, yeah, sure, I'll take it, what the hell. They're going to find, oh, you mean I've got to count the difference between 100% of my ticket and 50%? I've got to, train my staff a bit, and they'll get me out of here. So one would certainly expect a considerable attrition in the, what I call the mindless acceptance of the local money. Now it's got to be a bit mindful, and certainly there will be a drop-off, both in the casual use by the participants on the side, but also in the underwriters. Most of these models have some sort of preferred list of the founding members, the people who are supporting it from the beginning, the people who've invested, a few hundred quid or something in the project to make it work. Well, they may or may not be attracted to this. And frankly, that's a good deal of the educational component. The people, the businesses you want in this sort of a project are the businesses that are affirmative, committed, intelligent about it, understand it enough. The beauty of the transition time model is nobody has to understand a damn thing. It's got nothing to do with understanding. And in fact, if people understood it, they wouldn't be bothering with it at all, which is one of my complaints about the model. But this one does require at least an acceptance of the possibility. Suspend your disbelief. Imagine that you can have your own money as a business. Imagine that the money you issue becomes a support for the community. Do you want to give it a try? Here's a method where you can do it without significant risk. Obviously, some inconvenience or administrative issues. Obviously, some considerations about exposure, about implementation, about effect. Is this going to expand my business? Is it going to compromise my credibility in the local town or whatever? Big issues around with that. But it means that the businesses that do sign on are going to be strongly committed and more integrated as a community in each other. You see, we've started most of these systems, and we've had 3 or 4 shots at it now in different ways. And every time we've started them with a round-robin, will you if they will package. We'd go to one business, then another, and then another. And in each one, we'd get into the space of, we're not going to ask you to do this individually, but if 20 of you achieve the same sort of standard of, yeah, I like it this much and I will do it at this level, would you be one of those 20 or 30 or whatever threshold level you decide is appropriate? And that has proved to be very effective. It only takes a few weeks. You go around, you talk to the businesses. Most of them will say, go away. That's very quick. It takes 30 seconds. You smile and you leave. They've qualified these businesses as disqualified for this process. But any of them that will sit down and chat with you, well, it's a fairly straightforward proposition. Take them through it, show it to them, explain the propositions, the costs, the procedures. And most of them will give you either, well, I'll think about it, come back when you've got another 10 people and we'll talk about it some more. And we've found that very easy to create. I know with, for instance, the Chiemgauer in Austria, or is it in Bavaria? I'm not sure where it is precisely. In the Chiemgauer in southern Germany.
Germany, yeah.
Has done very well by sending out blonde Rhine maidens to persuade the local businesses that they should accept the money. If you send out a 17, 18-year-old to promote the system, it has more effect than sending out a 55-year-old with a beer belly. And it's worked. Businesses are attracted to things that are simple and available, and why not? And our model would suggest that using the ambience of youth, the enthusiasm of youth, the the affinity of youth would be a very good way of soliciting the first 20, 30, 50 businesses to be underwriters in this. So it has proved in our experience, at least, from setting up community currencies on this basis. Although somebody's gone. What's just happened? Are you still there?
I'm still here, yeah.
Well, something went click. Never mind, I'll ignore it. Back to where I was, which is that in our experience it's been quite straightforward. And so we would anticipate that, a month or so of legwork, and you'd have the necessary businesses to propose the transition.
Yeah, okay. It kind of makes sense, I think, in principle. I think my kind of initial reflection, there's a couple of thoughts, really. One is that if we're trying to focus specifically on, say, on how you would move from a transition currency or a backed currency to a community currency in the way you define it, the benefit, as you said earlier, of the transition currency is that basically low cost. You might want to call it a kind of low cost, low benefit model, really. I mean,
whoa! Just a minute. Low cost?
Low cost in terms of the business. I'm talking about here.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the business. Right. Gotcha.
Okay, so from a business point of view, like you've rightly identified, one of the great strengths is it's very easy for businesses to participate. On the other hand, as you also identify, with many of the models at the moment, there's very little benefit. So, and it seems to me, the shift to your system, to kind of a more of a community way model, places a greater burden of cost on the business. So kind of my instinctive understanding would then be that the businesses would need a much more demonstrable kind of indication of the benefits to them.
Oh yes.
And I'm not quite, and I think that's again something that came up in some of my discussions with transition people in the UK. Is I kind of, and maybe again this goes back to a cultural point, but it's understand. I'm not quite sure what drives the community way. Is there anything that beyond kind of philanthropy that would drive a community way business to participate? Because you see what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's our point all the way through it, is that I'm just going to try and add somebody to our conversation here, because Les is trying to do that. It may work. No, that's not right. That's not them at all. I can't find her. No, I'm not going to do that. He's going to have to wait.
Okay.
Les got a jam and I couldn't clear it. Yeah, they do have to be acquainted with the wider benefits, we look on all of these currency initiatives as basically training grounds and opening the context for the individual, the business, the community group, the local government to understand the value of money that comes back when you spend it. I mean, literally that. The money you spend comes back because you're in a loop, you're in a closed network, which is distinct from conventional money. Now, very, very, very few people have the slightest idea of what that means, much less any experience of the benefits and the power of it. So the initiative here is that we're going to the businesses and we're not saying, here's this huge problem and cost and overload that we're asking from you. We're saying to them, do you want the first inside track to the greatest thing since sliced bread? Here it is. It costs you nothing in cash. The administrative process is zilch. Yes, you undertake a commitment to your community. Yes, you do. That is a privilege. That is an opportunity. That is a powerful thing to do. It is not a burden. It's rather the opposite. Now, of course, a lot of businesses are going to say, right, on your bike, buddy, out of here, for sure. But they're the ones we don't want in the early inceptions anyway. The ones we want are the ones who say, blimey, this looks interesting. Give me some more on this. How do I do that? You mean I get zero interest line of credit? It gives me access to a new layer of the economy that didn't exist. It gives me preferential market differentiation. It gives me a tax break. Why not? You see, now, if you get into that threshold of conversation, it's straightforward. If you don't get there, then that's taught you something very effective. 90% of sales is about disqualification. You've got to ask 100 people to find out that 90 of them don't want to talk to you. And the quicker you can get to that, no thank you, preferably without black eyes and blood on the streets, the better. And this is a pretty quick one, because there's a visceral reaction from most people, which is, I don't know, I don't understand, I don't want to, get out, go away. People are like that. Businesses are more like that than people. The business is an acutely anxious organization at the best of times. So yes, there is a threshold. The threshold, however, is perception. It is not cost. Because this all comes up on the positive side of the business's ledger. It's enhanced access to new markets, new money, low cost of money, zero cost of money, which offsets their current banking costs a little bit. So, you've got to take them through that. Otherwise, yes, you're beating your head against the brick wall. And that is a developmental cost, but in our experience, not an unsurmountable one at all. If anything, the most costly part of our process is the subsequent promotion of getting the general public to lay down 100 quid and get 100 quid.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. I thought that bit to me seemed to be a much more straightforward transaction.
Yeah, it is. You're dead right. It is more straightforward. That doesn't mean it's easier. It just means the situation is simple and clear cut. You go to and this is where the existing facility of a transition town is very useful. You got the counter at the local bank or credit union already, and you got the procedure. And now there's a little half-page flyer that says, we have changed our procedures. The money doesn't go just into the reserve fund. The money now goes to the charity of your choice. Tick the box you want. Go. Now, I think with the existing transition model, that degree of acceptance of change will not be too difficult to promote.
No.
But it should be noted that in the community way model, it is that third leg of the triangle that is the complicated one, or the time and cost consideration. The businesses are not, and given that we in this model also levy a registration fee on the business in community money, the cost of registering them is well covered by the revenue from the registration, so that becomes a profit generator or revenue generator for the project, not a lost cost.
Yeah.
However, when you're turning on the non-profits, that's pretty straightforward too. They like new money coming from nowhere, turning into cash. They'll go with that. But it's this general public business where there is no direct recovery. I mean, you may have to put several days and time per month into the process of promoting this, and there's no direct recovery from it because you don't want to intrude upon that and say, oh, you're changing 100 quid, we get 5 of those. You don't. If you change 100 quid for the school gets 100 quid. That's the game. And without that sort of insistence on direct convertibility, you're in deep trouble, or you've undercut your model badly. So to preserve that, you've got to have an effective way of turning on the general public that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg and doesn't bankrupt you. Pretty important. And that I would regard as the technically demanding part of this package. The loss of business participation, I love it. Let's make a distinction between the businesses who are just free riders, easy riders, paying no damned attention, aren't thinking, are being specifically quite cynical about this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being cynical as such, but it doesn't mean that we want them as the core of our community-minded initiative. If we want a community-minded initiative, you want the businesses that can think, can act. And so the tie-in is strong, but we can dump a lot of businesses if we can make that transition from general acceptability to chosen acceptance. To, yes, my business is in this community. You know that T.S. Eliot line about community, why do you join together in this community? I think it's from Wasteland or something. Is it to make money from each other? Well, yes, that's mainly what most of our so-called commercial communities are at this point. They're just markets.
Yeah.
And it's not even particularly cynical. It's just realistic. Well, we need to change that. We need to have a layer in our economies where the economy is a community initiative. It is community commitment and engagement and good for us all.
Yeah.
Anyway, can I? Oh yes, you had the critiques, the problems that came out when you talked with people about this. Can you please continue with that?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the big ones was, like I say, was kind of and with the thing we've been talking about, how do you reinfuse the businesses, or how do you persuade the businesses to kind of adopt this, getting them to accept one sort of currency to some extent is a challenge. So to then say we're going to phase out one, and this is a new system and it's going to work in quite a different way, that's the problem. Yeah, always. And I think that relates to the fact there's a slightly bigger point here, which is the fact that actually, whilst there are benefits of trying to do this with an existing transition currency because of the things like the acceptability and there's also a downside is definitely the fact that from a business perspective, the transition currencies probably in a lot of places aren't perceived to do a great deal for the business. It relates back to your original critique. I think a lot of business people with some of the early models that have been tried in the UK would probably agree with you and say there's no perceptible change in economic trading patterns that have arisen. So therefore, there's perhaps actually an additional barrier to then saying, well, actually, we're going to sort of scrap that scheme and do it a different way. Because it almost gives the business an opportunity to kind of say, oh, no, thanks, we're done with this kind of thing. It doesn't work. But the fact that the transition currencies may not be perceived to work that well might actually be a hindrance to even signing up a handful of really committed ones, I guess. And also, I guess, the other issue that is the fact that one of the strengths of the transition currencies is the general acceptability, that in most of the places you can go and spend them in quite a lot of places.
Just one brief moment here, so I'm going to try and add Les more to the conference because he's just got here, and I'd like to bring him in if we can.
Yes, hello.
Thanks, Les. Glad you made it. We are reconnected after a while. I'm sorry about this. I'm going to bring in Nathan now. I hope you're still here. Sorry, Noel. Hope you're still here. Noel. Noel. Sorry about that. That appeared to be an attempt to connect to Les and it crashed the system. But I think we're still back up. And I'm not going to try and connect Les again. We've still got about another 10 minutes on this show, 15 potentially, and we're soon be covering good stuff, so I'd like to stick with it.
Okay.
And you were explaining the difficulties that are perceived for the transfer from one to the other. May I ask you to carry on, please?
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of finished, really. It was, like I said, that in some regards, it could actually be more difficult to transition from a backed currency in existence to a community way than perhaps to implement a community way from scratch.
Well, yes, that is certainly true. We're certainly not advocating, only go through this. It's
no, sure.
It's the frequency of these popping up, the ground being broken, if you like. I look at it like the initial ground cover. Now you can come in with a second crop. But definitely transition is bad. Everything is, nobody likes to change. And one has to sort of, in a way, we've got lemons, let's make lemonade here. That's why I emphasize, yes, you'll lose a lot of businesses that are currently putting up with the current one, as why not? After all, it's here, and I look like a schmuck if I don't.
Yeah.
Now they're going to say, oh, I can look like a non-schmuck and pull out of this, I'm gone. And frankly, I think that's good. I think we've got to start making this differentiation between, do you know the citizens idiots line? I've got to check this out, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. The early Greek democratic society, a citizen was somebody whose actions were engaged with the community, whereas an idiot was the person who was just looking after his own act.
Right.
Now, we've got to find the distinction between people who see themselves as potential citizens and the people who are determined idiots. There's nothing wrong with being a determined idiot in the sense of I got to look after my business, my life, my family, my world, or whatever, and nobody else is looking out for me, and so therefore I minimize my tax exposure, and I do this, and I do that, and the other, and nobody gets a nickel out of me without a fight. That's real, and there's nothing wrong with being that sort of an idiot, a self-interested, self-organized entity. And in fact, inside a proper community currency, the idiots are fine. They tend to create the commonwealth by their actions, whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not. But at this inception, we are talking to the businesses who might say to themselves, I wish to be seen as a citizen of the community, and I wish to take the responsibility, accountability that requires. So yeah, we're raising their game by bringing them into a game, which is a different game, and as always, change the game, people go nuts. People get weird. So, yeah, it's not an easy thing. But given that the effectiveness of the current transition time model is so questionable, I think it's worth, I hope it's worth some of these organizations beginning to take a look at this. One of the contagion elements here is the old Tom Sawyer business. You want people painting the fence, make it look like fun to be painting the fence. Similarly, if some businesses make the transition to a community currency model and are able to demonstrate that it's bumping their business up nicely, that they're getting a lot of traffic in this new currency and it's profit-making transactions and all manageable and goodwill and everybody's happy, then quite quickly a lot of the fringe people will start coming in on it. And I see the same thing at the meta level, that if a couple of transition currencies demonstrate the effect of transition and case study it, cost out what they did, how it happened, how long it took, anecdotal narratives, etc., then bloody hell, they'll all be doing it 3 months later. And given the difficulty that our world is in at the moment, I think some urgency and immediacy is a good thing. I'm in a hurry. I don't apologize for that. In fact, I'm rather dismissive of anybody who thinks that we have time to spare.
Okay.
Now, I also felt it was worthwhile. You see at the bottom of my notes, I give a breakdown for some 10,000 people.
Yeah.
I felt it's useful to sort of do some numeric benchmarks around this sort of thing, so that you can talk about how many people in Totnes, for instance. Is it I can't remember.
There's about I think the town itself is about 8,000 people.
But the region that it relates.
Well, and then well, it depends. I mean, the hinterland of the market towns are around about 20,000, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very typical mix. You know, you've got a focus center, and you've got the peripherals, and 10-20 seems to be quite a common scale for the small town, the regional shire, or the whatever. So I scaled this, and I said, look, in North America, in Canada, per capita expenditure per annum is about 20 to 30,000, depending upon whether you're in a high income level of the country or a low income. Around where I live, it's low. We're about 20K per person. There's 50,000 people. That makes us a $1 billion economy per year. So taking the same sort of scale, I said, well, 10,000 people at the somewhere 20 to 30 indicates something like 250 million per annum, as in dollars that's counted. But of course the scales can be changed into anything you like. Now when we talk about the catchment of a community currency, we talk about first of all, how many businesses have employees in your local community that are part of what I call the market site. Employees in the school district, employees in the hospital, employees in local government can't be considered direct participants in a community-weight currency, because those agencies can't easily accept and disperse that. So the catchment of a local population of 10,000 people, the number of people who might be in what I call the market economy, as employees in the cafe or owners of the bakery or whatever, probably about 1,500. You know, you take out the aged, you take out the youth, you take out the unemployed, you take out the people in government jobs and so on. So you can probably say that, 15% of the population work in the business sector. And utterly arbitrarily, I said, listen, if the total expenditure is $250 million per year, 250 million, let's say 100 million of that goes through retail, restaurants, services, etc., in the local business community. Now, if we had 10% of the Totnes group or something playing this game, which is, I know it's extreme, that's in the future, it's not where it happens, but suppose we got 10% of the Totnes businesses involved in a Totnes community currency, then on this scaling, that still relates to something like 10 million per year of retail. And 10 million a year is quite a large number. Now, I put that number out because that same 10% of businesses, if they went at the scale of £1,000 or dollars per employee as their donation in community money, that works out at about 1.5% of the total sales per annum that go through that sector. So it's not a huge imbalance to the local grocery store or the local cafe. If everything went straight across the board, they would see 1 or 2% shift in their traffic associated with that money. And if that's too much, then there's something weird about their business. If it's too little, then the remedy is quite simple. Be more aggressive and get the rates up, because you'd have that opportunity. As you know, the one, I know, hairdresser in 10 in town that's doing this, you will have a preferential attraction to that 10% of the population that's doing it. So you might have a pretty high impact on your hairdressing salon through this model. And the degree of injection of community money might be more consistent with recovery of your entire donation in a matter of 6 months or 3. And the question one has to ask the general business is, well, the question you have to ask is, do you feel lucky? Like, is increased business good? Is this what you really want? Would you rather have your money back in 3 months, 6 months, or 3 years? Now, if a business is saying, oh, I can absorb it in 3 years, oh, no, $1,000, 1,000 quid, my, oh, exciting, nervous, then they'll go slowly and it'll take a while. But if a business says, blimey, this stuff has leverage, it produces sales, it produces results, then they get more aggressive in their marketing of it and they can see strong results, which is what we're trying to demonstrate.
Yeah.
The advantage of money that goes around is it comes back.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind me just asking a quick question, what happens to the businesses that overachieve and kind of end up with an excess of community way dollars? And
what do they do with it?
Yeah.
Well, the first is they're not obliged to go into the positive. Their obligation under civil law for their issued promises is to redeem those promises, get back to zero. So their attitude should be, we're taking this soft paper, this local stuff. Is it producing more traffic? Is it producing more cash flow at the point of sale? If it is, and I could take this funny local money and burn it in the back room, I can flush it down the toilet, I can do anything with it, I'm still ahead. So anything I can do with this surplus income is great. And it's curious, if you ask people what to do with surplus cash coming in, they'd say, just mind your own business, I don't have a problem. To do with the surplus community money coming in, well, staff bonuses, new projects, things that you wouldn't possibly put in the cash budget, repaint the business, hire a string quartet to play in the cafe, sponsor the local kids' soccer team. You know, like 1,000 things you could do with this surplus that simply moves it on and continues benefit in the community. Again, if a business can't see how that works, then we really don't want them in this business. This is the community way is really an intelligence test. It's an intelligence generator and intelligence tester. Try this, see what it does. Are you awake yet? That's the story. And got to say, it's not easy, particularly from our experience in our hometown. We've found a huge amount of aversion, anxiety, risk, confusion, misunderstanding, malice, and politics. We've found it all, and it's not easy, but life ain't easy, is it?
So if you could succinctly sum up the problem that Community Way is trying to solve, how would you describe that?
Perception, perception, perception. People only see what they see. And if what they see is something they don't quite understand, that has parameters or aspects that make them anxious for some reason, then that is their perception space and that's what they live in. And while they've got that perception, there's absolutely nothing you can do to persuade them it's not a communist plot or a religious cult or a Jewish conspiracy or a get-rich-quick scheme for somebody. You know, that's where their heads have gone, and that's where they stay until their perceptions lift. So it is always a question of what do people think they are looking at? And that's a big one. With around money, people have deeply built taboos and anxieties and fears, and they don't go away fast. Well, I just got to say that I think that may be the end of the recorded component, in that the clocks have run. I'm looking for my page to find out what it says. And I think we're probably no longer recording. Well, it doesn't say that. We may still be recording. It doesn't matter much. We've said plenty, I think. We've got some good material down there. Appreciate that. Do you have anything to add to this before we hang it up?
No, I didn't think so. That was interesting. But no, I think I'm pretty much done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that very much, Noel. I'll probably make some notes and transcripts on it, try and pull out the main points into some sort of a document supporting the one that I sent you as a draft. And thank you. Much clarification.
Yeah, no, it's good. Cheers. Enjoyed it.
Okay.
Okay.
I look forward to that list membership. The process.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Cheers then, Michael.
Goodbye.
Bye.